All right, being 12 o'clock, I'd like to call to order the August 4th, 2025 meeting of the full advisory board. I believe I need to take attendance, starting with Peter,
I happen to be present.
and that is good.
Linda
Then
Miller present.
Scott Bates present.
Dan Gainsborough present.
Mark Howell here.
Karen Busker here. Emily Rush present.
I do not see, do I see anybody? Lee Smith,
Present.
thank you. Wow. And yeah, how about Elizabeth? No, I don't see Elizabeth yet. Okay. Next order of business is to identify a clerk for the meeting. Emily, thank you. And then we have some minutes from July 14th.
I move to approve the minutes of July 14th, 2025, the MCI Concord advisory.
Excellent.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, go around the hub again.
Aye.
Peter, sorry, Linda,
Aye.
Scott, Dan, I, Mark,
Mark, aye.
Aaron,
Emily, aye.
Lee,
Aye.
and Elizabeth, welcome.
Hello. Aye.
And Patrick, welcome to. Okay, great. Thank you all. All right, the first order of business, if I'm following this agenda, is the public comment. I believe that's because we're ending with the executive session. So, are there, not to put people immediately on the public on spot, is there anyone in the public that has something they want to share?
So Dan, I could take this as an opportunity because we sort of discussed this last time. If there are people we want to consider like adding to some of the subcommittees with their expertise, is there a process? What was the process we're doing?
If I understand the question that you're asking, somebody from the Historic Commission, I think had.
Or a planner who lives in town who's interested in adding their expertise to the discussions.
I think what we decided was they are welcome to participate in the meetings as a member of the public. And they can either attend by Zoom or most of those meetings are by Zoom. But I think that's what, and I think maybe your point, Peter, did we talk about that we wanted to just get the chairs to weigh in on that too, or?
Well, I'm doing it because some of them are in the audience and I wanted them to hear our discussion.
Okay, all right, thank you. And so what I would like to say is thank you for anyone that is willing to do that and welcome. And it's always good to have that input. And now I see a couple of hands up now, but they're moving around. Wendy, you had your hand up for a second?
No, it was a mistake. Sorry, Dan.
That's okay. Not to put you on the spot. Thomas McShane, looks like you have your hand up. Unless it's the cursor. It might be the cursor. It is the cursor. I'm sorry. All right. Okay. So not seeing any other public comments, I'm going to move on to the debrief the land use working group discussions with Scott.
Yeah, so we've met 3 times now, and we're in the process of writing the subgroups based on the 3 different needs of police, fire, DPW, and the municipal administration. We have toured the DPW site. We've toured police and fire station in Concord, and as well as the fire station in West Concord. And we have a tour set up for this Thursday for MCI Concord, for the group to go through MCI Concord and see the grounds and the layout there. And now we're organizing these 3 main subgroups, and we're charged with gathering information on the need, on the square footage needs of those different groups and looking at available land. We're just getting the land, we're just taking some, so we're getting organized like we did with this group.
Any impressions of the, from your site tours on the status of the facilities?
Well,
Or not?
we found, I mean, I found the DPW site was, in really disrepair. It was
Is this
very
West
crowded.
Concord or,
The DPW site.
I'm sorry, DPW, on the center, yeah,
was,
Kai's, right.
Very crowded.
Yeah.
Disorganized. It's a lot of buildings were in rough shape. Safety was a concern. Parking, keeping our trucks and, under the weather and keeping them protected. It's not a great place for it right now. And then sort of discombobulation of the administration and different offices, everybody in different places. So there was definitely a need for looking at that site, whether it's a rehabilitation or adding buildings and renovating there, or finding a new site for DPW.
Okay.
And we went through police and fire, and we found a lot of issues with that in terms of just it's not compatible with the current equipment. Where their usages, it's very tight, very inefficient. Just not meeting the needs right now of the current needs of police and fire for Concord. The problem with that site is it's very tight, it's bound by wetlands. So there's not a lot of room for expandability there. And then I didn't go to the West Concord site, but again, it's the issue with the buildings, the old building not compatible to accommodate the new rigs that are required for West Concord. And then we're gonna look at other things like the MCI, and we're gonna look at 229 Main Street as well, different sites. So we're looking with the existing needs. We're also looking at available land. We're gonna look at Peabody and things like that. So we have a lot of work to do.
And you had made us aware about the which I appreciated. I think Shannon sent around the video of one of the meetings.
Yes.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I sent you the video of last week's conversation.
Right.
And there seems to be a little bit, we can talk about that.
Yep. Okay. Anyone among the board have any questions for Scott? Linda? Oh, sorry, Elizabeth?
I'm curious if anyone else watched the recording besides me.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna say I thought it was dismissive of what we've done. I thought there was some feeling in my mind that we're not on the same page at all. So I would like to discuss that for a second. I mean, there were some comments that were made. Maybe I'm the only one who feels this way. But I know some comments made about how we did an okay job, but I know Mary said that she thought that we didn't do a good enough job on analyzing some statistics. She said something about the state has other options. I'd like to know what that means. And also she implied that she's been having conversations with you, Dan, that I don't think any of us have been privy to. So I guess I'm feeling a lack of transparency and a lack of that our report is going to go anywhere. I got the real sense that's like, great, you guys did a report. Now we're going to take it from here and add and we'll come up with some other things we want to see. I'm worried about this because I think the state is looking for this kind of division and is going to not be thrilled with it. And I also feel like it kind of undermines all the work we've done. Happy to hear other people's view.
Sure.
I was honestly, thanks Elizabeth, I was honestly taken aback by the fact that we are revisiting MCI as an option for, police, fire, or DPW. I wish there was a charge from the beginning from the select board that this committee look at MCI for potential town uses and not after the fact, after we've spent all this money and time and all our efforts and hours. And now we're, according to Mary, we're now open to the idea of other things besides what we're coming up with a vision. So I was honestly taken aback by that meeting and very upset by it because it feels like we're going backwards.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, throughout the process with public, we said no decisions are being made about municipal facilities coming on to the site. And that's something that we were looking for input from the public on before any decisions were made. And this, let's leave it at that.
Sure, Linda.
I think it's been clear from the outset that should the site be used for municipal use, that the key driver of having it be cost neutral to beneficial financially to the town would not be attainable. So I think we had moved that aside, given the instructions that, you know, the economics of this, both for the state and for the town were very clear in terms of, you know, what we drive for. And so, I don't think that was clear or understood, in the meeting of the land use, group, that, we had different constraints and different considerations that were built into our process, that they in their including MCI in this process completely ignored. So I think that was unfortunate.
I want to just come back to your point, Elizabeth, that you made in terms of my conversations with Mary and potential lack of transparency. All the communications that I've had with Mary have either been in the context of DCAM meetings, because occasionally she participates in that, or updating the select board. There have been no other conversations outside of that.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just definitely, beyond this, what's going to be there in terms of municipal services, definitely got the feeling that this is nice that you guys did this. One of the members said we could have figured out that you were going to have a mixed use site without spending $400,000 in a very dismissive tone, which I'm sure you all saw, which is an opinion. I don't disagree. We could have said it was going to be mixed use, but more went into it than that. The feeling that I got, and I think as a board member, it's frustrating because I feel like, all right, you guys did it. You didn't do, you know, as much as you needed to. And don't forget, we're the ones having the conversation with the state. I don't know what it means when the state has other options. Honestly, I just don't, I feel like we're going about our thing in earnest. And I don't necessarily feel like we're going to give this report and the select board's going to really have listened to it in any way. So that was my frustration with the transparency.
Okay. Well, part of what I'm hoping to do today, we have a pretty full agenda, but part of that is to sort of, everything I think is in the interest of and preparing us for our quarterly update with the select board, which, if we're prepared, and hopefully we will be a week from today. So,
yeah, I want to make a comment about this too. The purpose of setting up the land use working group was to try to figure out what the optimization is around town-owned property, which is really outside of the scope of trying to figure out what the optimization is around the MCI property. And I think it was very clear from the outset that if there was some carve out for municipal use in the MCI property, that was clearly going to, you know, degrade its value in the marketplace. Anytime you have a government taking of land, that's what happens. However, the piece that was missing and the rationale that the select board really had for setting up the land use working group was we don't have the ability to quantify the benefits that would accrue to the town of optimizing using some portion of MCI or not using it. In fact, we don't have that analysis for any of the properties that are potentially available. And so the whole purpose of the land use working group is to try to figure that out, even as we, this particular advisory board, try to understand what the community wants for MCI and what will benefit the community the best. And until the land use working group comes back and says, yes, we would get you know, some kind of quantifiable benefit by doing administrative consolidation, which is one of their work streams, or moving DPW, which is another one of those work streams, or leveraging, you know, the site in some way for public safety, which is the third of their work streams. We don't know what those potential benefits are, and that's what we are looking to the land use working group to calculate. And I realize that once those two sets of analyses are done, there's going to have to be some reconciling of which choices are available. Now, what we have in the background, and I'll just say it out loud, is the state would like to move ahead with redevelopment of MCI. They don't want, yet another large piece of state land that's a decade or two down the road sitting undeveloped. And I think that's a place where we're in serious agreement with the state. We don't want that either. Exactly how soon that visioning for the development is done is, what's an acceptable time frame for that is a little bit up for debate at this point. But that is I think the goal that we have is to try and get to that answer as soon as possible for the town of Concord. So it's messy, it's very complicated. And I think that the reason that we tried to set up these two distinct groups was we realized that the task of trying to optimize the town facilities was going to be a big distraction if it came into trying to work up MCI, which is complicated enough in itself. So I apologize to anybody who feels like this has somehow been, decided in advance. It has not. The select board is really looking for advice here. It's looking for the best advice that this board can come up with, recognizing that there's also a need for municipal facilities. Speaking for myself, we've invested in 5 new school buildings in the last 2 decades in this community, and we have benefited in our school programming because of those 5 new buildings. During that same time period, the public safety infrastructure, the DPW infrastructure has gotten more and more and more, verging on obsolete, let's say. And at this stage of the game, with the number of properties that are potentially redevelopable, I just submit the general question to the community of when, if not now, are we going to find appropriate, better sites for this? And how is that programming going to get redone? Maybe the answer is redevelop is in place, but even that needs some kind of swing space. I mean, those of us that remember the rebuilding of Thoreau School, remember that for 2 years, those students occupied the same campus as Alcott, along with the new school and the old school, in order to make that done. That kind of thinking has got to be done so that there is a master plan which may span a significant period of time that talks to how this development is done. So that's what our goal was in creating these charges. And I know that that's sometimes difficult to articulate in the language that we end up putting in there, but that's what we're looking for, and I hope that's clear to everybody here.
Do you respond?
Mark, I just understand, I mean, it seems we're doing things a little bit backwards. I think the municipal needs should have been outlined leading up to our charge. So we could have had a vision for the possibility of incorporating some use of whether it's DPW for police and fire in this original situation, because it seems like in these discussions I'm having with land use, it seems like they're zeroing in on MCI. There's a lot of people from the town and in the committee who look at MCI as the solution. Because if you look around Concord, there's not a lot of available land for big uses like DPW or police and fire. There's not. And so MCI is a very attractive site for solving that problem. However, our charge was never to incorporate that, and now we're going back with the land use committee to look at this, and it's the most attractive option, from a land point of view, not from a developable fiscal kind of point of view, which I've already spelled out. I'm just thinking, I feel like we're 1 step forward, 2 steps backward here, and this whole our work we've done as a committee here, which I'm super impressed with our committee, what we've done. But now you heard in the recording, I don't know if you heard the recording, I said, like our charge was this, and then Mary said, no, there's still options for other things. We're going to go back and talk to the select board. It's really up to it. So it seemed like there was a door open for additional things besides what we're coming up with our vision. So maybe now
I guess where I'm sort of landing on this is that I don't necessarily, I can appreciate, especially having watched the video, of some of the frustration and concerns that people have raised. I don't, and maybe I'm, I don't know if jaded is the right word or what, but having done planning, I'm gonna look at Aaron for a second. It's messy. And especially in the context of, so I don't want to be dismissive of what you're saying. I just want to try to offer this up. Especially in the context of large institutional users, because I'm looking now at Alan and Russ. Things change pretty rapidly. And so I think the work that we did collectively as a group and with the help of agency stands on its own legs. It was a great piece of work in a very short period of time. I think I'm hopeful that it can be used and embraced and built upon as the land use folks start to do their work. It would be nice, perhaps, having listened to everything, if maybe they came to one of our meetings and we have, as collectively as a group, have a chance to say, it was a lot of work. Do you realize? And some of these other concerns that you have articulated with me, because it's not clear that they do fully appreciate that. And so I guess that's just a suggestion I might throw out. I look to you because I've said this to other people. You're my boss, right? And you and the select board are.
Yeah, so I've been trying to articulate what the select board needs to get out of this. I noticed that there are a couple of people who are members of the land use working group who have their hands raised, who may want to comment here. And it might make sense to hear from them if you want to take those.
Sure. Do you want to do that now? Or did you want to finish your thought?
Well, no, that was, so I don't need to say more than that, but I do recognize, and Scott makes a good point. It would be nice to be able to articulate what the municipal needs are. Those municipal needs have been floating around in the background for some time. That's why there's a 2018 facilities survey, which has been out there. And frankly, this community has never been in a position, or never seen itself in a position, to actually address these needs in very significant ways. And so at this, my broad point is that I can't really imagine a time that's more likely to be able to provide solutions for the municipal needs than right now. And so what I'm pushing for us to at least give those an airing and decide. It may turn out that, the MCI site's not appropriate for anything beyond, wastewater treatment and that. And certainly if I was a private developer or I was looking to dispose of the land for the highest possible dollar amount, I think one would rapidly come to that conclusion. But we as the representatives of the municipal services understand that if that produces too many pupils, we're going to have to build a new school, which is a cost to the community. If it produces too much need for wastewater treatment facility, we won't be able to support it, and those kinds of things. We are charged with actually making sure that the infrastructure, that all those other things that could be built are built on, is available. And so that's plain and simple what we're trying to build into that conversation, is in what ways does the community have the capacity to address those potential uses.
Sure.
I did not watch the recording yet, but I will. But I just want to observe that, first of all, as a town, we had no choice but to jump into action as soon as the MCI plans were announced by the state, right? Select board did the logical thing, convened the committee, gave us a charge, we're off and running. Subsequent to that, the land use committee gets created and starts doing its thing, right? And in many ways, as big as MCI is, it's a subset of options, right? And so optimizing across those makes a lot of sense. But I just think that, I like what you said. The work that we did stands on its own. It's good, it's valuable, it's gonna be really helpful. But integrating our efforts with the land use committee's efforts in some way does make sense, because there's a lot of overlap there. And so the idea of having a joint meeting with them, I think, is a really good one. So we can figure out kind of who's doing what, right? And maybe this committee has to pause while the land use committee makes more progress, or I don't know, but coordination with them is gonna be really important.
Good suggestion.
Just to build off that, I know folks want to speak, but to me, I always come back to like the elephant in the room with regards to MCI, which is the state, and the state's control of the site. And the heavy fiscal cost is going to be to remediate the land, to deal with the wastewater treatment, so. To leverage John's point, bringing us together, like it would be a shame if I'm not saying this is the case, but if our two committees were divisive. Because I think together we need to act in uniform as we are working with the state to understand. What's driving the states and the state's decisions.
Great point. All right, if it's okay with the advisory board, I'm gonna go and check in with folks with this based on where the screen is. I don't know who had their hand up first, but Keith.
Thanks very much. Keith Bergman, speaking as a member of the Land Use Working Group and frequent flyer here at the MCI Concord Advisory Board. And first off, I think that the MCI group has done a magnificent job in working through this important project. And in coming up with, I mean, you put together a lot of building blocks which are critical for both the town and the state figuring out what should happen at this site in the years ahead. I'm struggling as a member of the new land use working group to make sure that our group is not at cross purposes with all the work that's been done by MCI Concord Advisory Board. And I am and just looking at, I think, at the big picture, whether it's the land use working group or the MCI Advisory Board, both of us are creatures established by the select board. The select board speaks on behalf of the town to the state. That's our function. My read on this is that the number one, as Mark indicated, the number one priority for the state is to have zoning brought to the next year's annual town meeting, zoning for MCI Concord. If that's the case, then I think it's then what we need all hands on deck for, and that's the MCI committee, the working group, but led by the select board. It's the select board's call. They're the ones who are negotiating the town's position with the state. It's for us all to be on the same page of what are we trying to accomplish here. I was sort of feeling like the land use working group could easily be at cross purposes with the MCI advisory board, and I do not want to see that happen. But at the same time, it is, regardless of the work that all of our groups do, it's the select board alone that represents the town in the interface with the state, and the state can't proceed without the town. That is just how it works. So I think it's that the joint meeting that needs to take place, if I could propose, would be for the select board and the MCI advisory board and the land use working group to get together and make sure that we're all on the same page with the select board. Otherwise, we won't know what the master plan is, what the strategy is in negotiating with the state. And I think that ultimately we're all here pulling for the best interests of the town of Concord. And we've got some big issues with the state and definitely do not want to be at cross purposes. So thank you all for the work that you've done and are continuing to do.
Thanks, Keith. Sven?
Okay, let's see if I can start a video. No, I'm just doing like that. So Sven Weber, co-chair of the land use working group. I think it's again, as you all did an amazing job, not only in the given time, but with everything that you had to look at. So the land use working group is not there to reinvent the wheel of what you did. As was pointed out, is we have to look at an umbrella strategy as across the different lands that are available on completely different timelines, and some of them completely unsure if they come available at all. What is a 10 to 20-year picture, and how this in the end work together? So that's first. Second, I as a co-chair can say is absolutely yes, we should have some kind of a joint meeting. I had proposed twice already to have some kind of update or a joint meeting that we as a group, the land use working group, just get up to speed in all you did, and to understand is there something to consider for us, if at all, and what timelines and what it is. So far, we were guided more just look at the report, but I think it's very easy, specifically after the MCI tour that is scheduled, where we got a quick look to reconcile this with some kind of a joint meeting of the two groups together. Again, we are not here to reinvent the wheel. We have to have the umbrella view of the town being in 18 different locations, several major sites coming online in completely different timelines. And we have a need of failing in buildings in different stages. So that's where we look at. We have a similar mountain in front of us like you had. From my perspective, is my personal view, is MCI works on its timeline. The state defines the timeline, and whatever works in that works. And you did a great job.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Just very quickly, I want to just rewind to the actual agenda item and then just comment on Elizabeth's comment. I think at the meeting, if you look at it, we are very early in our process of forming up and figuring out what our work plan is. And part of that is, and it has been for a while since the work group was formed, to figure out how we're going to mesh with the MCI advisory board. That was a question I had early on. So I think a lot of the questions and the discussion was in that vein. How are we going to mesh? And I think there have been some comments here at the meeting. Yes, we have to do that in a variety of ways of doing it. So I think that meshing is important. The other meshing that we need to figure out, if you look at our charge, there has two phases. Phase one of our charge is squarely focused on municipal needs, public safety, and DPW. But phase two is to look at other needs beyond public safety and municipal needs. And we have to keep an eye on that in terms of our land use planning so if we suggest dedicating a piece of land for a municipal purpose, that may take it off the table for something else. So I just want to say, I think a lot of this early conversation with between groups is really important, but we're trying to figure out how this is all going to mesh together. So I don't think we were pointing fingers or being dismissive. We were certainly probing at that meeting, and we'll continue to probe together because we have to figure this out. Okay, thanks.
Great, thanks. Any other comments?
How do we, what's our timeline for zoning then? If we're going to be opening, meeting and with jointly and talking about sort of big picture, are we on a schedule?
So one of our tasks is to do a scheduling exercise, which I think you're going to help us walk through that with us, walk us through that. So I think at the conclusion of that, we'll end the executive session. My hope is we'll have a better idea of that. I think John Emily's point is that it may make sense for us to pause some of our efforts to let stuff catch up, but in the meantime, I think what I started to, I don't want to get into it now, but I started to sort of put down, I suspect everyone has a lot of good thoughts to add to it, that what are the critical path items? And now I'm really pleased you brought this up. Land use was definitely one of the items on my list. So I think we got to figure out how it fits together. Everyone else good? Okay. So the next item on it, thank you for being our representative. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. The next agenda item is an update on the DCAM coordination meeting. My head is a little bit spinning, so I might look to Megan and Mark to, and then if I think of something that, if I recognize something you guys didn't say, but we did meet last Friday. There is definitely a desire, I can say this much, there's definitely a desire on their part to continue to move things along. I think Mark and Megan made it very clear that we don't intend to stand in the way of that. That we're feel pretty comfortable with the work that we have accomplished so far and will continue on. So Megan, do you want to? Okay.
Yeah, so there, and John is right, there is an ongoing conversation, and those coordination meetings are part of the conversation that we're trying to have at a working level with DCAM to understand what they can do, what they are currently doing. And part of that very definitely is the timing of the zoning. I think that there's more than a few of us that think that trying to get to this annual town meeting is a real stretch, even if we, even if sitting here today, we actually knew what we thought was the best use, I think it would be a pretty big lift. So we've at least offered the idea, and I think this is the kind of thing that's worthy of that, if any issue is to potentially schedule a special town meeting, which allows us to take a look at the considerations that the land use working group might have, that the planning board might have, and that our staff might have about when we are really ready to do this. And I sense that despite the rumblings that we're hearing from the state that they want to get moving on a project, they also recognize that it's better to have a project that's favorably supported by the community than to be perceived as sort of, pushing us into something that we haven't had an opportunity to do. So we've expressed the willingness to work on that schedule, and I'm looking forward. What I've been trying to do in those meetings, probably more than anything, is to hold enough space for this group to actually put our heads down. We've gotten great data from agency. I want to say that out loud. A lot of work has been done, and I feel like we've had now a few weeks to sort of digest that work. And this is the meeting where we get to start to do what I've been hoping this board would do, which is dive into it and really try to come up with a concept that actually makes sense from Concord as developed by people who live here.
Thanks. Are there any questions of anyone relative to that?
So I guess the only real technical update is DCAM is now in control of the site. The Department of Corrections is not there anymore. We are, anybody who's looked at the correspondence can see that, the public is chomping at opportunities to understand it better. They have been able to organize access for the land use working group, which I think is critical because they do need to understand the capabilities of the site the way some of us that have toured it have seen. But I think that the next step is going to be, what asks do we have along those lines as well? And I think there's some openness to receiving those requests.
Yeah, I've seen a number of requests in the correspondence about at least removing some of the razor wire Or maybe it's just the top of the wall, but I don't think we have to worry about the public scaling it after they get through the lower. Razor wire, so that would be a, a good faith measure that I think the community would be very responsive to if you convey that to DCAM. I know they're concerned about liability issue, but I don't think it should move the needle on that one way or the other.
I think that has been communicated, especially at the beginning. It's been a while since I mentioned it, certainly can. But I think, and I don't want to speak for them, but they do have a lot of security concerns, and I don't know if they want to make too many adjustments now. While we have this like private security in place, but I think we can certainly.
If we at least ask them, then we can tell our
Yeah.
public.
Yes.
We've asked and they've said no.
So, John, I'm just, before you go, John, I'm going to suggest that we swap agenda items 6 and 7, if that's okay with you, Aaron, not now, Scott, but, because I want John to give us a community outreach, but just for people to think about that for a couple of minutes.
Just community outreach update.
Yes, please.
So our update is pretty brief. We did meet with agency last week. The question was, what can we do to sustain the momentum, the communication with the town? We haven't actually put the report onto the under our website yet. And so we had a number of things we thought would be great for agency to do. Again, they built the website, they control it. So over to all the ideas we had, basically, let's focus on the two most important things: getting the report up on its own page with a nice, efficient summary, so people can very quickly get the executive summary sense without having to wait in the report. Then we also asked them to give us a slide deck that we could use to go back to a bunch of the stakeholder groups we met with previously. It was also suggested we might want to go out to surrounding towns, and I do think that in terms of building support and alliances for what we're trying to do would be helpful. So those are the two things. We had a bunch of other ideas around, for example, putting together a social media campaign that would go out over time to drive traffic back to the reports or video, whatever. We said, let's just focus on these two most important things. And Elizabeth's going to help us get pricing for that. And then hypothetically, we could go to them every few weeks and say, okay, here's another small job, another small job, another small job that we can use to extend that engagement. I guess the third piece they're going to do is they're going to train somebody to take care of the website. I don't know if that's Shannon or someone from our committee, but we're going to get have the ability to take care of ourselves, so we're self-sufficient.
Great. Peter.
Yeah, John, just to build on that, I've got a talk scheduled with the Neshoba Valley Chamber of Commerce and the head of MassDOT on the 9th of on the 11th of September to try and build that coalition of communities along Route 2 to support whatever the end result for the Rotary is, so we can move it to the top of the transportation improvement plan whenever DOT comes up with a solution for the Rotary. And I also have a talk scheduled with First Parish in Concord's First Tuesday group November 4th. I'd like to invite someone from your committee to join me for that.
That's great. And I think emphasize one more point. This idea of what's the point of the community outreach subcommittee going forward, right? I think one of the things that would be really valuable is for us to build support from as many quarters as we can. Because if it's only the select board that talks to the state, it would be better to have the town of Acton talking to the state, or those communities along Route 2 talking to the state, all kind of feeling part of this effort. So to the extent that we can build kind of a larger alliance of folks who are interested in seeing a Route 2 design put in place sooner than 5 years, and kind of doing cool things on the MCI Concord site, that's a win. Anything else from the committee members? No. Yes.
Just noticed that the subcommittees are sort of organized by. That's cool.
Wait a second, Aaron, you're speaking.
Well, she's sitting in the middle.
Right.
Here before.
True. All right, so do people think there's merit to swapping this phasing scheduling discussion with this? I mean, they're both important to me, but I'm wondering if we, my thought process was if we talk about schedule, then that might inform some of the site conversations. Do people have an objection or a feeling one way? No. All right, okay, good.
So explain,
You and I had talked about.
we talked about that I was gonna talk to a developer that.
No, this was the conversation about doing that exercise, and we can do it collectively, but just sort of do a brainstorming session of thinking all the things that we think are
Yes.
critical tasks. And begin maybe to start to think about what the relation to, like, which has precedent for which.
Right.
And so I probably should have done a better job of explaining it to everybody in advance, but I think we can probably do it. If need be, I can prime the pump
Yeah.
with some of the things that I start to think about. But does everyone understand what I'm trying to say, or what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I'm happy to join you in pump priming because I've been
Good.
taking notes based on those comments.
So to me, this is all working towards disposition goals and strategy. So this is like all the things that we think we need to be either do additional work on, or questions that we need to answer, or critical tasks to get us to that moment. So do you want to go first, maybe? You want me to go?
Sure,
Yeah, go.
so, just some ideas in terms of phasing.
So wait a minute, sorry. We need someone to document it and just to make sure we capture all this, and you got it? Okay. And because at some point, the thought process was we'd actually take it and I can turn, if people want, I can turn it into another, or Scott, one of us
Yeah.
can turn it into a micro project schedule or something. Right. Sorry.
So synchronizing bringing traffic generating uses online with the route to capacity improvements, and can also read the same thing with ComApp capacity improvements. Another might be monitoring school capacity and designating the proportion of housing that we're going to be creating for seniors and or units that would produce additional students for the school system. And then monitoring the wastewater treatment facility capacity in terms of bringing the uses online as we've got the capacity questions answered there. And then looking at the availability of funding sources and trying to match those up with the infrastructure needs of the community as we move through the process. So just some ideas in terms of synchronization.
Excellent. Anyone else want to take a capacity one? You nailed a lot of mine. I'm in the fortunate position to having spoken with all of you guys, and so a lot of this came from those conversations. But a discussion, I think it'd be useful for us to have a discussion about density and growth. You know, and I know I've probably been saying that before, but what do we think is smart growth? What do we think is reasonable density? And
Remember we talked about the discussion I was gonna have with that developer, and I guess they're really good ideas. It's what's worked in the past. Do you want me to share that now?
sure.
So I had the opportunity to get on a call with a developer who's been very successful around the Boston area in building mixed-use lifestyle centers, and I wanted to really get a sense of what's the critical aspects that make a site successful or not successful. And he took a look at our site and he said, you know, he thought it was good work. He just thought that we really have to think about vitality. I'm gonna say 24/7. And you can't have residents here and retail here. You're gonna have he wants to see really the residential incorporated with the retail and really have like a vibrant center, you know, like, and he wants to see really a anchor store, like an anchor grocery store, or something that draws people there. He doesn't want it to be this a big box, but he said you need an anchor store and you need to have a mix of residential and commercial spaces all together. And sort of bold zoning to accommodate density and challenges the balance of community needs with traffic and school enrollments. But having residential separate from retail, he just said that's just gonna be like a ghost town. You're gonna have like different groups like this. So we have to really think about with our visioning when we go forward is like really thinking about the mix and how it's sort of congregated.
I'm beginning to think, sorry, to interrupt you. I'm beginning to think that you should save that for the Aaron, because these are pretty specific as it relates to site uses. It might.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
it's, I realized it in
It's fine.
retrospect. So hang on to it for a second.
That's fine.
So I don't want to lose this thread. And I think, again, no particular order, coalescing around a preferred scenario. I think this is something we got to do. We're not doing zoning until we do that. And that's why I think probably density and growth conversation has to happen first. We talked about this Town of Concord's program for the MCI site. We need to understand that before we start doing zoning.
What does that mean?
That is this long laundry list of the land use working group and all of their, and whether or not, and I'm not suggesting, Emily, by saying that it's zero or the whole shooting match, but it's some you need to understand that. And thank you, by the way, for anyone else, if I say these things and they're vague, I want people to make sure I clarify it. The disposition goals and strategy, I mean, that's ultimately what you know, and we're gonna theoretically, we're gonna talk further about that in executive strategy session. Zoning and land use, that and the plan for that and the schedule, the timeline for that. Emily, no, John, I think maybe both of you guys, this idea about, is there an institutional partner floating out there that I think we should explore that further. I think that's going to be really important to us. Continue the community outreach, support the slide decks, all that. And then your point about developers, and Emily, you had brought that up too, about potentially, you know, is there a cross section of folks that we want to talk to and get some more feedback on? And Scott has already taken some initiative in doing that. So that's what I have. I mean, I'm sure they could be blown out in more detail, but are there other high level things that, Aaron?
I would like to understand, from a zoning perspective, what our real levers are. The site is all one zone at the moment. Is it a simple matter of just picking a new zone for the whole site? I don't think that's the case. Early on, we talked a lot about form-based code. I know Elizabeth Hughes presented some things to us about that. I wonder if it would be worthwhile to have a conversation again with her to understand, you know, what would really be the goals in the zoning process and what would really be the opportunities there. Like, when I show my handful of slides, I'll maybe tiptoe into this, but are we really parcelizing the site in a way that we're identifying certain zones? And, you know, what is the real control we have over those particular zones? In that comment.
Great. Linda?
In line with that, perhaps talking about incentives, how to incentivize what we want through the zoning. That is build 4 stories, but with like underground parking. However.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Who's our legal partners for the zoning process and when do we engage them?
I don't know that we've defined that yet. Because
I want to have conversations with, you know, legal counsel around some of the zoning questions, to really get at that whole issue of, do we want to parcelize it? Do we want it one zone and one vote? Rather than splitting things up. So.
Since you can't split things up until you have a fairly well defined.
Yeah.
Plan for the site, right? Whereas if you say, on this site, you're allowed to have, these are multiple permitted uses, right? That doesn't give you the same protections necessarily. I've got a question I'd like to understand.
Sure.
We have this gigantic obstacle, remediation costs, wastewater treatment, funding. What are the options to fund this, right? And it feels to me like, the state has a certain duty to bring the site back to zero, maybe. I don't know if that's realistic, but until we figure out who's gonna pay for all the remediation, I feel like it's gonna be hard to make any progress in this.
Maybe, Mark, I don't know if the select board know whether the developer, I mean, the decant's assuming that the developer is gonna recoup all that from the sale, from the developer, from the cleanup? Or are they're gonna put out additional cash to clean it up?
We haven't gotten a definitive statement one way or the other is probably the best way to do that. So at most I could characterize, but it's certainly, you know, at the state level, we're getting the message loud and clear that they're not feeling awash in money.
Right.
So, especially given what's been going on for budgets this year, so, they clearly want to try to dispose of this property with the least amount of sort of out of pocket that they can go, which leads them obviously to a certain set of outcomes.
Right.
Sorry, Linda, and then I see Elizabeth has hand up. Sorry.
I was just gonna comment with regard to zoning. We ran into this with the MCI Communities Act. And that is the strategy, i.e. come to town meeting. With 7 different parcels and 18 different uses or whatever. And then all of a sudden, someone wants to go to town to, go on with an amendment. And then another amendment. You can have 50 amendments, so you have, the strategy of actually how you can get this. The mission.
Across the
line without being picked to pieces is something to consider.
so town meeting strategy.
Then also something that, Scott, if you might, I might ask you to bring this up with the land use committee, which is, are they looking at sort of the tax rate, and as some of the capital improvement projects start to get paid for, can we have a policy to not exceed the current rate as some goes on, some goes up, and that's sort of coordinating and at least when we start talking about coordination, that sort of makes a lot of sense to me, not trying to set it up so there's not a huge hit on our citizens.
We're gonna be about.
That's great, good.
Still too. Elizabeth?
Yeah, we talked about this in our last subcommittee meeting and to follow up on some legal guidance on what Peter, I think you were mentioning about zoning and what we can do. I would like to see what's been done about what the state can do without us. And I think as far as I know, it's just the 4 units per acre, which I know no one wants and is very unlikely to happen, but it would just be good to have some kind of definitive outline of what the state can do despite us, or not in spite of us, but even around our zoning.
What Elizabeth is referring to is something called the Affordable Homes Act, which is a state law that essentially says state-owned property can be developed without outside for up to 4 residential units per acre, regardless of how it's locally zoned. So that would be as far as, and I wouldn't say that we've researched, are there any other levers they could pull, but that's the one that we became aware of.
Yeah, it would be good to know if there are any others. There may not be, but.
Agreed. Yep. Any other points from, no? All right, well, thank you, everybody. That was good. So somehow we have to make some sense out of this, from my perspective, at least in terms of precedents or priorities. So that and I'll maybe with Shannon and Scott's help, I'll try to get something before our next meeting. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Aaron. I'm gonna take a break while you.
Okay.
But you guys can start. Can you?
You should be able to share your screen. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
So Dan and I had a conversation and, I said to him, one of the things that I, maybe in my own mind, was just craving was the opportunity to just kind of like think a little bit about the site with you all and like what is happening there and what the constraints are. And I think agency did this, but in their kind of timeline had to kind of go through it rather quickly. And I don't think there was an opportunity for us to all maybe understand them in the same way. So this is meant to be a very preliminary discussion. I put together quickly a few slides with what information I could gather, and then kind of the final one is a little bit about my thoughts on what some of the potential constraints are for kind of different zones on the site. So I'll go through this quickly and hopefully that sparks some discussion. So this was just meant to be sort of a base map of the site. This was the map that agency put together, which I thought was helpful in terms of identifying some of the kind of existing things that are happening on the site. We know that there's a large parcel that's kind of along the western side of Route 2 that's really agricultural and will remain in that capacity. There's a buffer again on the Assabet that is really a wetlands buffer, and part of our own regulatory process, there's a 200-foot riverfront setback, which has limited construction that can happen there. There's obviously the wastewater treatment plant along that zone that, also creates a bit of a buffer. So, really the core of the site is this kind of majority parcel that's, where the prison itself is. And then also the kind of Junction Village zone. So I just was trying to think about all these things together. And maybe one thing I might add to the previous conversation, Dan, is some sense from DOT on entrances and exits to the site. Like if we're gonna parcelize this or break it down in any way, we kind of need to know approximately where the roads are gonna be so that we can, think about that and identify, zoning. We can't just make it up, I guess.
I agree with that. I think in the absence of it, for whatever it's worth, and I don't feel great about this, but we could sit here and probably say, where could it come from? And have a couple different, if they can't produce it, but I agree with you. We need to be thinking about it. Yeah.
That actually sparks me, going back to our previous topic. It seems like one of the big disconnects between where Mass DOT is right now and where the agency report left us was agency's scenarios basically assumed at-grade connections to both Commonwealth Avenue and Route 2. And Mass DOT at the moment seems to be developing a grade separated with essentially a Commonwealth Avenue flying over Route 2. And so I think it's absolutely critical, the sooner the better, for us to reach an understanding of which of those major differences in design is likely to be developed, even if we don't know exactly where those things are going to go. I think that really unlocks a lot of what the thinking is going to be.
And I'm gonna look at Aaron again on this, but from an experiential perspective, driving in from the west of Route 2, coming in, that's the gateway to the town. So if it is a flyover, that's a very different message. And it's an ad-grade to my way of thinking.
Yeah. Right.
And a huge change to the town.
Yeah, I would. Where's the flyover land?
And
Context of the entrance.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You sorry, where?
No, he's saying where
landing it.
Route 2A someplace, but
Yeah, you're landing it on Commonwealth Avenue. Where are you coming? Is the ramp coming right down where we were hoping for an entrance?
The DOT, at least the concept in the last meeting, suggested that they would sort of use some of the parking lot, the western side of Com Avenue, and go up there and kind of come down, probably, more or less where the gas station is. So, something like that. So it shifts to the left. So the base parcel, which I think of as the big trapezoid, more or less, gets a little bit bigger because it shifts towards that, but then you kind of lose that. And to Dan's point, you definitely are, looking at something that looks like a hillside and a bridge, when you're coming into town as opposed to something very different.
And then I think the other piece of this is existing buildings on the site. We know there's some desire around some of the more historic buildings. There's also, as agency pointed out, some reuse potential. I'm not sure that the reuse potential is enough yield, given the things that may want to happen on the site, and they may not be in the right position for that to happen, and that becomes a cost benefit analysis of the yield for what they are. But those are things to all think about. They identified these three kind of non-historic buildings that could be potentially reused. So I also quickly pulled up current events, I guess, think about things. So I pulled up the GIS flood data for the site just to see what it yielded and what was happening there. I think, as we all know, it's actually a pretty good site in terms of its elevation. Again, this is just from GIS, but the bank, I think, on the west side of the asset bed is pretty high, and as a result, there's not a ton of floodplain the way there is on the kind of Baker Ave side of the river. That there's a lot more floodplain on that. So I thought that was interesting. And then I kind of took this off Google Maps just to kind of give us a little bit more context of kind of the overall site and scale. And it is not a dissimilar size site from the whole Baker Ave commercial area. In fact, that's probably bigger than the area we have to work with as a parcel. So just looking at the major commercial building that's there, that kind of takes up 2/3 of the main site.
Say that last part again.
So if you looked at, on Baker Ave, that's the old Walter building that's there. I didn't drop it in here, but for my own interest, I put a rectangle around that, and that, fills almost 2/3 of kind of within the walls. So.
And that's a great slide.
So then I started to put some bubbles on here to think a little bit about, what we have talked about. Obviously, we have the river. There's going to be a set, I assume, regulatory boundary that matches the rest of town that, pushes the buffer back there. We saw the FEMA flood data that, you really don't want to be building there. We heard from the public that there's a desire to have a robust recreation or conservation program. And so it makes sense to, in maximizing the use of the site, to overlay those things. So is there an opportunity to kind of create that kind of riverfront zone along the edge? Kind of moving in from there, this idea of municipal use that we spent the first half of the meeting on. Because the wastewater treatment plant is there, I think that already is identified as probably a municipal use. I was just thinking about this as sort of like striations across the site. Is there a potential that we want to expand that a little bit for some other use? Maybe not the whole site, but the wastewater treatment plant is kind of roughly in this zone, if you can sort of see my cursor there. So we want to capture a little bit more of the site towards Route 2 that maybe is less desirable for housing or commercial, and say there could be another municipal use if it fits within this, delineated parcel. So, that could be a discussion we have. Maybe instead of waiting for the land use group to tell us what they think goes there, we could say, we've got this area, what might fit, might be an opportunity. And then I think the bulk of the rest of the site really wants to be what we've identified in the report, is either commercial or housing or a mix of those things. And I'll do one more slide here. Thinking about how each of these parcels that I'm quote unquote parcel zones, let's call them, might be phased or thought about in a phased way. So given what we know, so just going by the numbers, zone 1, the parking lot site, again, we don't know what will remain of that zone after Route 2 and DOT work with it, but it's probably a later phase, just given the scale and schedule of that work. There may be some building reuse there with the white house that's there. There's the zone along Route 2, which I think I called mid-phase because of obviously the Route 2 work, but also a lot of it I think will probably remain as it's kind of proximate to Route 2, and I don't know that kind of this section of Route 2 would necessarily be rebuilt. And it obviously lends itself to some sort of commercial buffer or something that's gonna be okay along that kind of major highway. Three, yeah. Okay, three, that seemed like it was kind of common among the three scenarios. None of these are meant to imply a scenario, it's just sort of considering each sort of portion of the site. Three is really, the bulk of the site, and thinking of, where the current prison largely resides. Is that a later phase, just given the demolition and mitigation that has to happen there, and that may take a long time. Also, is there building reuse, as I mentioned before? 4 is the Junction Village site largely, maybe it's a little bit expanded here, I was kind of using the existing walls. To delineate, but. Perhaps we want to move forward with that, a lot of work was already done to establish that as a housing site. I think a lot is known about that site, conversations were already happening. Instead of trying to think about this whole thing happening at once, could that begin to support some of the work that may happen further on for a developer or the town, or however that may come about? Yeah.
Does the wastewater treatment plant need to be sorted out before anything can get done on Junction Village?
Should,
Does it need to be?
it should be, I don't have all the details that Alan does. And there's more information coming. But there's offsets due to older wastewater treatment plant, you can't put residential within.
Okay.
And there's other certain parameters, future growth, density increases, that kind of thing. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff you have to get done. Hopefully get some information sooner than later from our consultants. But yeah, clearly wastewater has to be mapped out.
And just another question on Junction Village, it would seem to me if we went in an early phase, before we had any change in the deed or understanding with the state that we could spread affordable housing throughout the area, then Junction Village would end up being 100% affordable housing, and I think that would be better if we
Distributed.
could
Yeah.
distribute it.
No,
So I don't know
agreed,
how long
and
that's gonna take.
agreed, I don't know that early phase necessarily means like it would happen before all of that was determined, like I think. We would still have to go through the whole zoning process, we would still have to have all of this figured out, just in terms of maybe a construction. Component, construction there could start while demolition may be occurring elsewhere on the site, just given what's already in play there.
Lee has his.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Lee,
I just wanted to point out that for the prior iteration of development at Junction Village, all the wastewater was going to be self-contained on site, not connected to town sewer.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
good, thank you. And Sven?
Unmute, okay. Just Sven Weber here, and this time in my role from the Public Works Commission. So we just as a background, sewer is important, wastewater is important. The sandbanks at the end there have a potential for another 300,000 gallons per day. Perhaps realistically, we can only permit 150,000 gallons per day. So when you look at that, not just only look at the treatment facility with 300,000, but also consider the sandbanks that would give additional capacity if you could include here. So just a side comment.
Yeah, I'll also mention, as long as we're, the section 2 and the rotary, the Mass DOT is looking at the bridge over the Azabeth as an integral part of the rotary project. So that whole bracket, that's a 1930s 4-lane bridge that is in poor condition now. And so one of the things that they clearly are seizing on as a possible opportunity here is the option of reconstructing the bridge, making a new bridge parallel that bridge and south of it, and using that northern strip of the MCI property south of Route 2 to enable that while construction to go on while doing that. So I think it's, I would actually expand that route, that two oval.
Yeah.
All the way down to the bridge and maybe, think about it like that's gonna be. In the way of anything that might happen in what's currently zone 5 and 6 in that northern tip while that work goes on. And we can expect that probably the relayed Route 2 is going to, come south a little bit by at least a few lanes width. In front of that. John?
I like the idea that you make about zone 4 kind of potentially moving forward sooner with housing. I talked to Dan about this a couple weeks ago, but this idea, I think one of the key things we want to sustain momentum in the state. We want the state to feel like we're making progress. We need to unlock tens of millions of dollars of state funding to deal with all the remediation stuff. I wonder if there's some way for us to move forward with a housing component, basically to show our support for it on that particular parcel. It's already zoned for that. You can do it, we want to have a certain amount of affordable housing here anyways. Perhaps not optimal to have it all in one place. By the way, there was a plan 5-7 years ago to do that, and we were all delighted with that, right? So I think it is an idea that's worth exploring. My question is, why did that project fail to move forward before? I think the town was actually committing a couple $1 million to it. Does anyone remember why it failed?
Keith may, or Lee, Keith?
I'm gonna mute.
Hi, Keith Bergman. I can't turn my video on. The project ultimately, the Christopher Heights at Junction Village required an additional $7 million from the state, which would have brought up the total project cost from I think initially 12 million up to 28 million. And it required another $1 million for a total of 3 from the town, and the select board by that time had soured on its relationship with the developer, so the developer walked away and it didn't get done. I did want to mention though that if you proceed with Junction Village without waiting for everything else, that and we would have in place a deed restriction that 100% of the housing that gets built there be affordable.
Yeah.
And if so, then that means that developing just affordable housing there will require far more resources than the town could commit, or any developer could commit. So part of that strategy might be amending if the Concord Housing Development Corporation, the property's owner, is amenable to amend the special act and the deed restriction to allow a mix of affordable and market rate housing in order to have anything built at that site. Because otherwise you'd need significant money from the state in order to have anything proceed there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I don't think any of these, I'm not implying that any of these phases would happen before there is an overall plan for the site, that there has to be an understanding of how many units, what type of units, how much commercial, all of those things before you wouldn't just start building without knowing what's happening everywhere. That was just a notion about, which parts of the site are more encumbered than others. Process. And then, as I mentioned, the zone 6, not really viable for significant construction, but a great opportunity to extend some of the recreation and conservation work that's being done in the area.
For easy math or, quick thinking about this, it's sort of clear that the further north you go on the site, the more constrained and more encumbered the property is. Even so, what you have identified as zone 3, because that's basically a recreation field, a track.
Right.
One could assume that that's probably less disturbed and, hopefully, in need of less work than, so. An expanded zone 4 that kind of incorporated some of that might be,
Yeah, I think, I mean, don't read too much into this, but like the Junction Village site is actually, the parcel is actually further north than.
Yeah.
And eventually even showing, so, approximately half of Junction Village, from what I can tell, is in the riverfront zone, so. It's a fairly limited parcel.
you can't assume, but, you know. We could hope.
In the Junction Village development concept plan, that was set aside as open space.
Okay.
Any further comments on?
Can I say a big
Oh
thank
my
you
God,
to Aaron?
yes,
Yeah.
it was really, really
Great
helpful.
work.
We're gonna
Trying to get her back.
Great job.
It's over here.
Nice try, Peter.
That was really helpful, super helpful.
Good.
So, I believe. Our next item of business is, go into executive session. I'm probably supposed to read this. Should I read the whole thing as it's written? Okay. So executive session under MGL, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A. I think that's subparagraph 21. Sub A, sub 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. If the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, which I guess I'm doing. So I'd like to,
You have to do a roll call vote.
Yeah.
thank you.
Need to move, so moved.
I need someone to make that motion.
Second,
All right, and then I'm gonna do roll call. We're around this way. Peter,
aye.
Linda, Scott, Dan, hi, Mark,
Aye.
Aaron, Emily, John, Elizabeth,
Hi.
and Lee.
I
I do not see Pat. Is Patrick there? Okay, Patrick.
Oh.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah.
Okay.
One-